Hi, Eric.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm doing well. How's everything down in Macon, Georgia today?
Going good. Weather outside is very nice and hoping for some rain. We need it.
Sounds good. I heard you caught the debate last night.
Yeah, actually I watched it twice.
Twice?
Yes, that is my commitment to Redstate.
And what exactly is your role at Redstate? I should say for everyone, we're talking to Erick Erickson here.
I am the managing editor of Redstate.
Gotcha. So, who exactly founded Redstate?
It started off as a 527.org. Josh Trevino came up with the idea with Mike Krimpaski and Ben Domenech, and then they found out I did election law and added me, and eventually we moved over to a .com, and Mike, Ben, and I, Josh is no longer with us, and added Clayton Waker, and now we have a core management team as a subsidiary of Eagle Publishing, and it's me, Clayton Waker, Ben Domenech, Mike Krimpaski, Jeff Emanuel, and guy who blogs under the name Thomas Crown.
Sounds good. Well, we can get back to the physics of Redstate later, but first let's get into the big debate last night.
Yeah.
Strong reactions at Redstate as to who won and who lost?
It's really going back and forth. I personally feel McCain pulled it off, but a lot of folks are fans of Romney and say Romney won, and I'm willing to give it to him. He did a great job.
Yeah, from the polling that I've seen, it seems that Romney, did marginally better than McCain, but it seems to me the real story was who definitely lost, and that was Rudy.
Right, yeah. I don't think there's any disagreement that Rudy lost. We're doing a poll right now on who lost, and Rudy is the overwhelming odds-on favorite as the guy who lost.
Yeah, I cited that in the blogometer today. It was topping out at about 38%, saying he lost far and away the leader. Right. Any thoughts on why that is?
Well, he tried to have it.
What exactly were Rudy's sins last night?
He had tried to have it both ways on abortion, that it would be good if judges got rid of it. It would be okay if judges didn't get rid of it. He had plenty of opportunities to address the concerns of social conservatives, who he's been very ambivalent or hostile to during the last several years, and he took a pass all around on all those questions. Many opportunities, and he just blew it all around. Do
you think it was the fact that he tried to equivocate on all of it? I mean, it seems to me that one of Rudy's selling points in the past was that, yeah, he may not get along great with the social conservatives, but at least he would take a position and stick to it. It seems to me that for a lot of his answers, like the Roe one, where he said it might be a good day, but then again it might not, and then later on the social conservative, are they good for the GOP? Just completely dodged. It seemed to be a departure for him away from his straight talkedness and more of a gamesmanship as to what exactly he feels.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it boiled down to. I mean, he really did a lot of equivocating. He did a lot of trying to have it both ways, and in the end, I mean, no one came across very pleased with him. The thing about Rudy is Rudy was the guy who was going to get things done, no holds barred, take action. That Rudy didn't come across last night. Rudy, the regular average politician, came across last night.
Yeah, I think was it Rich Lowry in the corner said last night was the night Rudy stopped being, the savior of 9/11 and became just another presidential candidate.
I think he's absolutely right about that. Absolutely right.
So you said earlier that you thought McCain was the big winner for the night. What's your McCain case from last night?
I think McCain did very, very well because he was the guy who stood out as the social conservative contrasted to Rudy, who can also appeal to the general election voters by saying, we've made mistakes, we're fixing mistakes, and he was willing to. Excuse me, I almost sneeze here on the webcam. He was willing to be critical. He was willing to fight. I think he probably creeped a few people out with his smiling after the gates to hell comment, but I think he came across as a strong leader. But
yeah, the gates of hell comment was a big hit here in the hotline offices. Yeah. Everyone got a kick out of that, and it's good at the corner too. I think Jonah's trying to make a new blog out of it. That's going to be the name for it.
He probably should. He'd do great at it.
You mentioned earlier that McCain had a very kind of ticked off attitude. Do you feel that is a preview for how he's going to run against Bush and how other in the GOP field might?
I think it probably could be. Although McCain has all along positioned himself as the I'm not Bush and Bush has made mistakes I wouldn't have made candidate that the others haven't. It was very interesting.
I know you feel that way, but I don't think a lot of people in the mainstream media feel as though he's been distancing himself from Bush, especially in Iraq. I think most people feel as though, McCain has been Bush's biggest, even an enabler, if you will. Do you feel he has a lot of credibility in the conservative blogosphere as a anti-Bush crusader?
Yeah, in the conservative blogosphere he does. I mean, if we're comparing the media to the conservative blogosphere, they've both got completely different perceptions of the guy. The media has been declaring him the front runner up until recently, and the he's Bush's go-to guy. The people in the conservative blogosphere have taken the opposite approach, that he's not the front runner and he is a Bush antagonist.
What do you think are his best critiques of Bush?
I think probably one of the biggest critiques that he's given very well, and he did last night, was the failure of Bush to veto all the spending and mistakes made in Iraq that didn't need to be made.
Do you think you're going to see, I mean, we've seen McCain definitely has led the league on the mistakes in Iraq, but I think, Romney also talked about he's vetoed before and he'll veto again. How much of a mirroring of McCain's critique on Bush do you think you're going to see throughout the GOP field?
I think it's probably going to get picked up. It's going to be very interesting because Fred Thompson's going to give his big speech tonight, and it's going to be interesting to see if he brings up Bush in the direction he goes. And my suspicion is people are going to be more following his lead than anything with McCain. I don't think you're going to see a lot of the candidates backing away from Bush significantly other than McCain, simply because McCain ran against Bush in 2000. He doesn't have a lot to lose from it now. But Romney has a lot of folks backing him who are Bushies, and the other guys are hoping to. So there's only so far from Bush that they can get.
Now, what's the speech Thompson's giving tonight?
Fred Thompson is speaking to the Lincoln Club in Orange County, California, which is a big high-dollar Republican donor club. Mm-hmm. Several of the candidates running for president right now tried to apply tremendous pressure to get them to disinvite him. And, in fact, from what I hear, he's going to give just a killer speech tonight. And I suspect that this weekend people are going to be talking about Fred Thompson's speech and not about the debate performance on Thursday.
Now, I had heard you before talking about Thompson and his trip up to the Hill, and specifically that even behind these closed-doors meetings with GOP congressmen who are asking him pointed policy questions, he evaded and said, basically, look, the whole reason I'm running right now is so I don't have to get into these policy fights this early. Do you first of all, is that true? And second of all, do you think that this speech in L.A. is going to continue that, or do you think we're going to see a change into more of a dare I say, substantive direction for a Thompson candidacy?
Well, I think he's been giving a substantive direction. He's come to Redstate several times and blogged there. He's got his own blog now.
He's crashed the site twice, if I'm not mistaken.
He has. We're always happy to have him come crash the site. And he's been giving substantive answers of where he wants to go. But I don't think, from what I've heard about these closed-door meetings from folks who attended them, that he's been willing to get into the fray and really get into a debate right now. He's not a candidate. He's positioned himself perfectly. He can talk substantive policy, but he doesn't have to debate the other candidates point by point.
So how long does this charade play out for Thompson?
If I were him, I would do it as long as I thought I could get away with it. I mean, it's perfect right now. My suspicion is, talking to friends of mine here in Georgia who are elected officials, a lot of them are holding their money back from the current candidates, thinking Thompson's going to get in. So he's allowing the other candidates to continue to burn money while at the same time holding money out of the political race, waiting for him to get in.
So what's the appeal there? I mean, color me confused. I know he was in the Senate for one term. I know he was on Law and Order. I loved him in Hunt for Red October. But who is it? Why is he? What does he bring to the table here?
Well, first there's a popular shirt out there now that says "Hunt for Fred November." I think that's running through the grassroots right now. That folks are starting to call themselves Fred heads. I really think the appeal to Fred Thompson is, number one, he is kind of a dynamic, larger-than-life character, and none of the Republicans running right now are. And
Rudy's not larger than life.
Pardon me?
Rudy's not larger than life.
Well, he was until Thursday night, which is part of his problem. Okay. But Thompson is a social conservative where Rudy is not, which gives him an added appeal. The other appeal is Fred has been willing to, if you will, talk the talk and walk the walk on issues. He in the Senate had a pro-life record. He doesn't have anything to run from like Rudy. He doesn't have anything to change on like Romney. He did do McCain-Feingold, which a lot of people will probably hold against him, although he's walked away from that. But this is a guy who, in all of his speeches lately, he hasn't played the nuance game, and every other candidate has. And there's a lot of appeal there. He's not afraid to take on tough issues that a lot of the other candidates don't want to address.
He seems to me having, somewhat similarity to Reagan as far as his history. I mean, Reagan was big into radio before. Reagan, of course, did movies, had more of a Hollywood background. But it seemed to me Reagan had a much larger resume in conversion to conservatism, from his work fighting communists down in L.A. in the Hollywood movie industry. Then, throughout the 50s with all those talks for General Electric, then Governor of California. It seems like Reagan had much more of a stronger background, pedigree, than Thompson does.
Maybe because Reagan was in the limelight for so long, but just because Reagan was in the limelight showing his conservative pedigree does not mean that Thompson hasn't had it. In fact, if you look at the candidates running right now, Thompson, in 1994, there was an article calling him pro-choice, but his stated positions in 94 made him more pro-life than Romney or Brownback.
Yeah, you look back at those 94 races, and even Brownback has, his supporters will see whether or not he has issues, but at least on par with what Thompson was saying at the time.
Right. Right, but we're to some degree comparing apples to oranges, I guess. Reagan versus Thompson. There's not going to be another Reagan, and the question I have for a lot of people who want a Reagan is: would they have voted for Ronald Reagan today in this environment, given his former positions when he was governor of California? If we're going to compare apples to apples, we need to compare Thompson to the rest of the pack out there right now, which a lot of people are. And a lot of people think the present crop comes up missing something, and Thompson.
Yeah, I think George Will made that exact same point about Ronald Reagan a couple weeks ago.
Right. He did.
Did you think any of the, as we call them, the hotline, the seven dwarfs established themselves? That is the non-McCain, Romney, Giuliani field last night.
Ooh, I think Brownback held his own, which was good. He needed to. I really think Huckabee probably came across better than all of them. He came across as presidential material. He had ideas. I was surprised he was as protectionist as he was in some of his statements.
Huckabee.
Huckabee. But he came across well. Huckabee, out of all of the second-tier and third-tier candidates, was the guy we should be keeping an eye on now.
Now, at Redstate, I really don't see a lot of support for any of the smaller tiered candidates that I might for candidates on the left and the other side, whether it's Richardson or Gravel, Kucinich. It doesn't seem at Redstate that there's anyone really sticking up for any of the non-big three at Redstate.
Brownback, I think, has good support. Surprisingly, we had a bunch of people flood the site last night who are Ron Paul fans, but they're not regular to the site. But, I think that's reflective of the polling in general. The majority of folks out there in the grassroots are supporting Giuliani, McCain, and Romney, and that's fairly reflective at the site as well.
Now, I noticed after the elections in November, then through December, January, February, it got pretty vicious at Redstate as far as supporters of candidates attacking other candidates. So people were attacking Romney incessantly. People were attacking McCain incessantly. People were attacking Giuliani incessantly. And then, I don't want to say all of a sudden, but definitely these days, if you go back over the past month or so, and it's pretty much dropped to zero. You really don't see a lot of front-page stuff at Redstate hitting on the candidates. Is this a conscious thing on your part, on your contributors' part? What's with the drop-off on beating up each other?
I don't think it's a conscious thing on my part, and in fact, I told the contributors my feelings on it. But they to each their own. Some people are still doing it. Romney still gets occasional barbs, as does McCain, and Giuliani.
Hunter Baker's always beating up Romney.
Right. But on my part, I've really gotten tired of picking fights internally when there's a lot of stuff on the other side that we're ignoring because we're so busy fighting amongst ourselves. It's March of 2007. How far off is the election, and we're already this fixated on it? There's plenty of other stuff more worthy of being fixated on right now.
Gotcha. So, speaking of the web efforts, who do you think online among the White House awaiters has the best online strategy?
I've got to give that to Rudy Giuliani right now on the Republican side, closely followed by Mitt Romney. I was very ambivalent on this question and would have given a leg up to Romney, I think. However, in the past few days, Googling for information on the Reagan Library debate, was very amazed to see that Giuliani had actually bought ads on Google tagged to those queries.
Right,
and the very first hit was a Rudy hit. You go there, and it gives you all the information about house parties in your area, and you can create your own. It was very impressive.
So do you know, is that Ruffini who's behind that, or do you know?
I think Ruffini is behind that. Pat Ruffini is just a remarkable guy at this. Knows it well, is phenomenal at it, and I really think it paid off for Rudy to sign on with Ruffini.
And Romney didn't have any such significant, similar outreach efforts there online?
Yeah, he does. In fact, but in Googling, I couldn't find it. I eventually noticed in my spam box I'd gotten an email from his campaign basically doing the same thing. It had been an email blast. That Romney went out, or that Rudy went out and got the Google tags, and searching kept going back to Rudy, I think showed a very impressive search engine optimization effort on his part.
Now, I know it may not be a purposeful strategy on the part of the different candidates, but it seems to me that there's a wide variance in the friends that different White House awaiters on the GOP side have online. For example, Romney has some truly big friends in Catherine G. Lopez at the corner and Hugh Hewitt out in Town Hall. I was wondering if you could comment on who you thought had, in the GOP field, had the better kind of surrogates in the blogosphere.
I think Romney probably has the best, hands down. You've got Hewitt and you've got Catherine Lopez out there. Although I think there's a trade-off there as well, because more and more I'm sensing people getting frustrated with there being so much partisan favoritism towards Romney from folks like Catherine and Hugh, that some people are really getting aggravated by it. I've spoken to several of the candidates running who are really not giving the time of day anymore to National Review or to Town Hall and Hugh Hewitt because of that.
Really?
So there's a trade-off there, yes.
Well, that's kind of unfortunate because the other, especially at the corner, I can understand more so at Town Hall, though I should say that although other contributors like Dean Barnett are definitely on the Romney train, Matt Lewis is definitely a Romney doubter. I read plenty of anti-Romney hits on Town Hall from Matt Lewis.
Right.
Catherine Ham's also hasn't made up her mind yet.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but you got to remember who the standard bearers are, and the loudest voices tend to be Hugh and Catherine. And more power to them. I think they're doing a good service for Romney, but at the same time, it sometimes descends into self-parody, I think.
True, but I was then going to go on and defend the corner even more because you've got Romney cheerleader in chief Catherine Jean Lopez is even after Romney took all those YouTube hits.
Right.
Even she backed off and has been very, very, soft in her support of Romney recently, even saying that she would be very open for a Fred Thompson run.
Yeah,
and then of course
that.
you've got John Podhoretz, who is an out-and-out Giuliani guy.
Yeah, and we can't forget Ramesh, who I think probably single-handedly has rehabilitated John McCain's entire presidential campaign.
Well, you're giving Ramesh a lot of credit there. Do you want to tell everyone, tell our viewers how Ramesh helped McCain out?
Ramesh wrote, as usual for him, Ramesh is probably one of the greatest thinkers on the right now, and he wrote a phenomenal article in National Review about John McCain being the most viable challenger to Giuliani, and comparing and contrasting, do social conservatives really want a guy like Rudy Giuliani to be their standard bearer? 30 years after Ronald Reagan, are we going to endorse a social liberal? And it made a very compelling case for McCain.
Yeah, no, and then he got into a fight with Andy McCarthy at the corner after that about whether or not Ramesh was a supporter of McCain or what exactly, National Journal's editorial role is in endorsing or not endorsing candidates.
Yeah, I just Ramesh held his own in that fight, and I think he's done a tremendous job for McCain.
What do you think about that issue, though, in a larger sense, as far as entities like National Review, entities, that's one thing for them, because they're a very established, even quasi-MSM source, and then you at Redstate, as far as endorsing candidates, etc. Because I think Andy's problem was that, Ramesh's article really came off as pro-McCain in a time when National Review maybe isn't necessarily endorsing people. Do you ever have that problem with Redstate? I know, for example, you at Redstate, you've been very soft in your support of Romney, but you've also admitted that, I'm a Romney guy at that point.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a difference between an individual picking a preference and a site or a publication doing so, which we've really drawn the line at Redstate that we're not going to do site endorsements. We would much prefer that the voters do those endorsements. It may get to a point where there's one or two guys left and we express a preference, but I think that's up for the voters. In a site like National Review, though, National Review has been both fiscally conservative and socially conservative, and it's the perfect outlet to make the case that we need a social con, fiscal con to be our leader. I don't think there's a need to endorse there, and I don't think Ramesh did, but I think it's the appropriate forum to make the case that Republicans should not abandon their social conservatism.
So, if Redstate's role isn't to endorse, what is Redstate's role?
Oh, I think we serve a good role educating and motivating our readers to get involved in the process. And it may get to the point, like I said, where there's one or two left in the field where we express a strong preference, but we can debate back and forth. We're all friends there. I can put up a Romney or a Fred Thompson post and feel free to have commenters tell me why I'm wrong and enjoy the conversation and maybe change my mind. But as far as taking an official policy of the site, we're in March of 2007. It's way too early to even be considering that.
Well, let me use it as a transition to our next topic, which is, is the right behind online? I know Robert Bluey had a post a while ago when the first quarter numbers came out showing just how far behind the online fundraising efforts were for the Republicans. MyDD's Matt Stoller picked up on it and, talked about how dominant the Democrats were. Patrick Ruffini commented on it, who we already talked about, who was working for Giuliani. David All, he used to work for Jack Kingston. And even Matt Turk, he used to work for Bush of all, kind of weighed in. You said, you'd like to post a Red State debate about it. Do you feel as though the left is outpacing the right as far as like online activism when it comes to fundraising online, when it comes to Google bombing, all the rest of these online tricks that the lefty sites are doing? Do you feel as though the right is behind?
I think the right is behind on the activism level, but not the fundraising level. I think that's a red herring in there, and I would disagree with all these guys who I consider friends on that issue. If you remember back to 2004, Bush broke all the records, including at the end of the day on online fundraising. It's just right now the right is very divided and hasn't made up its mind. There are a lot of undecided people hoping someone else gets into the race, so of course they're going to be behind on fundraising.
But even in total receipts, the Dems, outpace the GOP almost 2-1.
Oh yeah, I think so, but there's a lot of dissatisfaction and other issues playing into that. I don't think it has a lot to do with the online movement. I think where the online movement is behind on the right, though, is in activism. The right has been in power for the last 12 years, all of which has transcended to the online movement, and the right has become a group of people online who want to be pundits and not activists. The left on the other side went straight to activism and less punditry, and the right's going to have to catch up on that.
So are there any specific things you're doing at Red State or you'd like to see being done other places, either different from what the MyDDs and Daily Coasters are doing or emulating their activism?
Well, I think it's probably going to happen over time. We're actually in the process of redesigning Red State and giving thought to some of these things. I think Town Hall has done some of these things well by providing tools for people to email letters to the editor or write letters to the editor or contact their congressman through townhall.com and focus on state and local politics. But overall, the right's really going to have to start turning some of their online pundits into online activists. And we're starting to do that at Redstate, for example. Rob Bluey and I both on occasion will put up posts with links to have people call members of Congress on legislation, or just today the Los Angeles Times wrote probably the dumbest piece to ever appear in any journalistic publication ever about Fred Thompson, and we've been encouraging people to write the letter to the write
and what
letters to
was
the
that?
editor.
What was that piece?
Oh, it was I forget the journalist's name now, but it was basically Fred Thompson played a racist for 5 episodes of Wise Guy in 1988, so he's probably not qualified to be president of the United States.
Gotcha. I think I saw your post on that, but I never saw the actual Los Angeles
Truly
Times article there. So besides letters to the editor, etc., do you feel as though there is a necessity for a separate online conservative movement from the more established conservative movement seen in, whether it's think tanks, National Review, etc.?
No, not necessarily. I think it would be good to have a place where they can all come together as needed and do things. I think you've got to remember, though, that as the left and the right have evolved over time, the right has evolved into their particular issues groups. You have the social conservative groups, the fiscal conservative groups, etc., and they don't always agree. As the left has now tried to catch up to the right, they have, in a lot of cases, wrapped the party apparatus around the movement, which I think in the long run can be a very bad thing, because the party and the movement, the ideas in the party are not all the time the same thing.
So, do you see? Then do you see? I mean, do you see there's a problem that as I think the most highly trafficked site on the left is Daily Kos, and they're very activist. MyDD's further down there, but Kos is definitely up there in the activist ones. Whereas on the right, up top you have The Corner, you have Instapundit, you have Michelle Malkin, and as great as they are, they're not really concentrating on activism the same way as the Koses and HOSes and MyDDs are on the left. Are you worried about that gulf at all?
Yeah, well, I am, and I think other people are starting to pay attention to it. I think you'll start to see folks on the right moving in that direction, not necessarily a National Review, which is an opinion magazine, and probably not even a Michelle Malkin, who is a commentator, but for a site like Redstate, you'll be seeing us moving in that direction, I think. Of activism, encouraging our users to actually not just offer comment, but get active in the process.
Gotcha. Do you ever worry about kind of more liberal ownership of big media, big online entities, kind of the more bigger sites on the web like Google, Wikipedia, YouTube, all kind of have a more liberal bias in the same way that conservatives think the New York Times has a conservative bias, especially at Wikipedia, and we've seen YouTube pull down Michelle Malkin videos.
Right.
I think is that a concern of yours at all?
Yeah, I think there perhaps is a case to be made, but I get deeply, deeply suspicious of conservatives who would prefer to pack it up and go start their own thing than participate. And that, by and large, is it. Number one, I think we know that there are more left-of-center activists online than right-of-center activists online. So that's going to be reflected in, for example, Wikipedia. But the right shouldn't be packing it up and going to start their own thing and separating themselves off from civil society online. They should be engaging, I think, and getting more of their own to get online and participate.
So the model that worked, before, as far as looking at the New York Times, looking at Brookings institutions, and saying, screw that, we're just going to create our own. We're going to go create talk radio, Washington Times, Heritage Foundation. You would not advocate that model for online activism?
Well, no, not for run-of-the-mill sites like a search engine like Google or YouTube that's just providing a service. I don't think there's a substantive bias in things like that. Sometimes it happens, but I mean, oftentimes they'll correct it. And same with Wikipedia. Most of the people who participate there are left of center, but it doesn't have to be the case. As far as activism sites and things like that, certainly you're going to have right of center sites taking on that role.
You mentioned earlier that you had a bunch of Ron Paul people attack Redstate trying to promote his candidacy, and I noticed Ron Paul always does well in the Pajamas Media poll. Pajamas Media being a consortium of conservative bloggers. Instapundit's big into it, so was Roger Simon. Also, when you look at other technological news sites such as dig.com, they have a very strong Ron Paul following.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's a more libertarian bent to online readers than in the general public at large?
There may be, but my suspicion is it's just the zealousness of Ron Paul supporters who they're getting no traction anywhere. All they have left is to generate it themselves online. It's much easier for them to get their opinion out online than it is in the letters to the editor section of a newspaper.
Fair enough. What about at Redstate? Do you feel as though your contributors are all kind of more libertarian than the conservatives you interact with every day in Macon, Georgia?
No, I think that it's probably fairly balanced. Most of the guys at Redstate, I think, are good social conservatives. But, I mean, a lot of them do lean towards fiscal conservatism than social conservatism. It's there. It's just not as readily apparent in a lot of cases.
True. When you look at like kind of the larger, more popular conservative bloggers, throwing around the label conservative, loosely. You see Instapundit at the top of the list, definitely very socially conservative. Socially liberal.
I would definitely say libertarian, and I don't know that
right.
Glenn would disagree with me on that.
Does that at all concern you? That kind of the more highly trafficked site like Instapundit, that is generally considered more, to the right, definitely on the war on terror, generally does support Republicans, isn't necessarily as engaged activist-wise and isn't committed to the same social conservative causes that your Red State contributors are?
No, it doesn't really bother me. I mean, to each his own. Glenn's got a huge following, and he's very even-handed and linking across the board, and that's what he does. And I wouldn't expect him to do otherwise. I wouldn't expect him all of a sudden to create some sort of activism engine at Instapundit. He may link to one somewhere else, but I mean that's what he does, and it's his site. Who am I to complain?
Gotcha. Now, are there any other, as far as do you see any differences in the way the left and right are able to utilize the web when it comes to actually voting in campaigns? I mean, we see, Google bombing going on, we see fundraising, but when it actually comes to driving voters to the polls, do you notice that, one side, whether it's the online blogs or the campaigns themselves, doing a better job?
I haven't really seen that transcended into actual voters yet. I guess the best case scenario is Howard Dean's campaign from 2004, and we all know what happened there. I think it's very interesting if you paid attention in 2004 to online campaigns. The Bush campaign was single-mindedly about getting people to vote for Bush, and most of the Democratic campaigns through the primary, and even Kerry's campaign into the general, were really about building the online community and took away from, I think, some of the voting for their guy aspects of the site.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing you on a panel with Chuck DeFeo one time, and he was talking about something similar,
right,
saying that, one of his greatest moment, or his greatest triumph in the 2004 campaign was hearing a story about how poll workers throughout the country were seeing Bush voters come in with driving directions issued to them through the Bush campaign,
right,
thus showing that all their online efforts of contacting voters, identifying likely voters, making sure that they knew when the polls were open, they had directions to them, that he could see that effort coming through, and that, like you said, they had a more single-minded effort to actually get voters to polls, that the left in as far as building communities.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But on that point, though, I see a larger possible problem in that a lot of the energy that I see on the left is very on the left side of the blogosphere is very much kind of directed at frustration with the party and viewing the progressive movement as the progressive internet movement as an entity within itself, and
right,
that kind of fuels their activism and identity to say, look, we need to do this to fix our party. Whereas on the right, people are kind of more into working with the party to help their online efforts.
Yeah.
So, for example, when you hear Matt Turk and Ruffini and David All talk about the things conservatives need to do online, you hear them a lot talking about what the RNC does, what campaigns are doing, etc. So it's more kind of institutional. While when you look on the left, you see a lot more, people at MyDD, Daily Kos talking about stuff that they need to do to help, build these communities. Do you feel as though that dynamic, the more establishment nature of the conservative movement, hampers its growth online?
To some degree, I think it probably can. I think there's less innovation on the right side. Part of that, though, I think is being conservative in general. Conservatives generally take a wait-and-see approach. But yeah, at the same time, I think it's a double-edged sword, though, because the left might have the potential to overrun itself by being a progressive movement online and can't transcend that offline. The right having that anchor to the party establishment, I think, may be able to keep itself grounded, although you run into problems like last year when that happens, where the online and the party diverge. The online activists are more conservative than the party establishment, and by the end of the day, a lot of folks online just threw their hands up and threw in the towel, didn't want to help.
Because they're so frustrated with Foley spending, everything else.
Yeah, the spending and the entire dynamic of Republican behavior in Congress. There were a lot of people online who were saying they deserved to lose.
Gotcha. So I hope you could close out just with kind of your personal history. We talked to Chris Bowers earlier in the week, and he told how he went from a Temple graduate, English graduate student, to a full-time but not well-paid professional blogger. And so I understand that you are also a full-time blogger. Could you talk about what your background is and how you got into, or how you managed to end up with a dream job of blogging full-time?
Sure. I graduated from Mercer University Law School here in Macon and practiced law for just under 6 years, doing primarily corporate law and election law. Loved political consulting, was flying around the country doing political races at the time through the practice, and started blogging at Redstate in June of '04 when it came online. And
so you were already, through election law, working as a consultant for different races in Georgia and throughout the country?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And just Redstate was a natural fit. I was doing election law. They asked me to be on the board of directors of Redstate shortly after they got started. And
you talked about it earlier as a 527. What was the original seedling idea behind Redstate?
The original idea behind Redstate, I think, was to be a right-of-center version of COAS and to tie a legitimate 527 into that, back when the laws were still dubious and there were questions as to what was and was not the right way to do things online, trying to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. It kind of diverged from that over time, hence moving from a 527 to really just a blog and media company. And I left my practice of law to work in Washington for a year for the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, helping them with some blog-related issues and outreach online. And after flying back and forth from Macon to Washington every week for a year, was just so burned out. And about that time, Redstate had been selling ads and were doing quite well, and just decided I would go full-time with Redstate, and the rest is history, I guess you could say.
And what is Redstate's status now? I know didn't they recently get bought up by somebody?
Eagle Publishing owns Redstate. I guess you could call us a wholly owned subsidiary. We kind of run ourselves, and they have very, very limited editorial control over us, other than they send me a paycheck and we do our own thing.
So, I mean, I completely agree. You guys have your own editorial control. But as you look at MyDD, look at Daily Kos. They're all independently owned, HOs, etc. Do you think it's at all significant that when you look at Redstate, the organ of political activism for the right online, that it is in fact a subsidiary of the kind of more establishment conservative movement? And Eagle Publishing does human events. They publish a whole bunch of books.
Yeah, Regnery Publishing. I don't think it's a big deal. And if anything, it shows. I mean, conservatives are committed to the free market. This was a free market decision, and we're continuing to make progress there. We call them our Beltway overlords, and we rarely see them, if ever. So I don't think it's a huge deal. Ad revenue would have been great to sustain us, but over time, wanting to grow the site and take it to the next level, it was the great thing for us to do, and we've been very pleased with it.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks very much.
No problem. And when you guys, become wealthy enough, please do subscribe to Hotline.
Absolutely.
Hotline subscription, so you
I'm
can
a
get
big fan.
even more timely news. And we'll talk to you later, Eric.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.